Okay, so this concluding section of our first section, part 3, is still under the umbrella of remission of your sins, but it is the principle of sharing with the poor. My grandpa once shared a comment in a gospel doctrine class when Laura and I were first married. And the topic, we were in the Old Testament and we were studying Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah, for the people of the Old Testament, it was a city that was wicked. Mm-hmm. And then in the New Testament, it's referenced as a wicked city. Even in the Doctrine and Covenants, there's references to Sodom and Gomorrah. It is a city that unfortunately is remembered for its wickedness.
Sin City.
The Sin City, yeah, right. And so my grandpa made a statement that just blew my mind, and Laura's too.
I had never thought of it this way.
We've brought it up a couple of times. And he said the true sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is that they refused to give to the poor. It was the pride over their materialistic blessings that caused the downfall of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so with that being said, that's kind of our introductory in talking about this last section, verses 16 through 30. And within these verses are tons of principles of truth. And we're just going to use the scriptures because when you start getting into kind of reasons why we give, reasons why we don't give, it's very hard to put concrete...
it's more personal. Like, I feel like you can't just say, do this, do that. It's between you and the Lord.
There's not really universal laws for this, and that is why the Spirit is so important in our lives, because the Spirit will prompt us one way or another during tough decisions that we have in our lives. And so we're just going to share some principles jumping from these verses. So verse 16, I'm just going to start off with verse 16. And also ye yourselves will succor those that stand in need of your succor. Ye will administer of your substance unto him that standeth in need. And ye will not suffer that the beggar putteth up his petition to you in vain and turn him out to perish. So the first principle that I'm going to bring up here is self-reliance. In regards to self-reliance and in regards to charity and donations and service, the first thing that we must do is we need to get to a place that we can serve. We need to get to a place that we are self-reliant. We are comfortable. This is one of the big principles taught by Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey often talks about the reason we focus on getting out of debt is so that we can serve others. That freedom allows us to serve others. If you're just struggling to put food on the table, it's going to be very hard to reach out and serve your neighbor. And so it's getting yourself to that position first. People that stand in need of your succor, giving your substance to those that standeth in need. It's putting yourself in a position that you can serve. The next principle we want to talk about is a little bit of the judgment side that comes into things. You want to take that one?
Well, in 17, it says, perhaps thou shalt say, the man has brought upon himself this misery. Therefore, I will stay my hand. And I've done this. I feel bad. You see somebody, like for example, on the street, and then a panhandler, and I think, okay, I would love to give them money, but are they going to use it for the right things? That thought goes through my mind. And, but that's kind of what he's talking about here is we can't judge. We cannot sit there and judge people who are in need and say, oh, they brought it upon themselves, let them deal with it themselves, kind of a thing. We need to have that heart to share with others, like we talked about in our last video. Once we have that love of God and understand that everything we have is His, we will want to turn to our neighbor and share it with our neighbor without judgment. I think that judging unrighteously is what leads to pride, or they help each other out, but that shows the pride within our hearts when we do judge them and think that, oh, they don't deserve help because of this or because of that. It's not our place to judge. God is the judge. He sees our hearts, and so we need to just be loving, have charity, and be willing to help out without judgment.
I love what Laura said, because I think it's easy to get caught up in this idea that when I have much, it's because I'm blessed by God.
Yeah.
And it's a very easy place to get to because when you get to a point of financial comfort or financial stability, it's easy to say, I'm so blessed. we're so blessed. And where the real blessing lies is in understanding of the things that we have. We are stewards over their things. They are not mine.
Not
like
yours,
Laura said, they are God's. Let these things are God's. And we are to use those things with wisdom and the Spirit. And to understand that, do I have extra this month? Do I have the ability to give? And being honest with yourselves and with God, and then allow yourselves to be charitable according to the Spirit. I love verse 19. For behold, are we not all beggars? Now you get into like the spiritual side, and you can't separate them. Yeah. You can't separate the temporal and the spiritual, and they are one and the same. It's like trying to separate our bodies and saying, "Oh, it's my spiritual side and my flesh." When it comes to the eternal plan of God, His plan is for the spirit and the body to work together.
Your soul, both of those together.
The soul, and it's the same thing with, I think, the spiritual and temporal debate. Is you can't divide or separate those. They are more united than we think. And so, are we not all beggars? Do we all have a moment when we are in want, when we are in need, when we are going to have to rely on another person? And so I just love that principle, kind of just bringing perspective into what we do with the poor, what we do with the things that we are blessed with, and being stewards over those things.
I feel like a lot of times Heavenly Father uses ways for us to learn that it's easier for us to grasp. I mean, here we are physically. Yeah. And so physically, it's a lot easier for us, I feel like, to physically give to somebody, to learn to then be more spiritual in greater understanding and knowledge of spiritual things. Does that make sense? Kind of like maybe a stepping stone to help us open up our hearts to more spiritual things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we received counsel when we were first married, and we've reflected on this time and time again. It was one of our bishops in our student ward, and this specific bishop, he said to us something that really touched us at a time when we didn't have a lot. Mm-hmm. We just had our first baby. Laura wasn't able to work, and we were both we're starting students, right? And he taught us a principle that he said about fast offerings, which is essentially giving of your extra in hopes that it's going to be used for someone that is in need. And that's what we do in offerings and things like that. And he said, if you cannot give when you are in this status,
when you don't
have much, you will not be able to give. Because often we say, oh, I will give when I have extra. I will give when I have surplus. I will give when I'm in a better state. That was what caused Sodom and Gomorrah, is that they thought that later on I will do it. Do not put off for tomorrow what you can do today. And so this principle of giving, even if you are not in a financially stable position, you can still give. And I'm going to read this next verse. This next verse kind of brings this home for me. Halfway down through verse 26. I would that ye should impart of your substance to the poor. Every man, right? Not just the wealthy. Every man according to that which he hath. Such as feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick, and administering to their relief, both spiritually and temporally, according to their wants. And I love how we kind of have this list setting here, because it shows that there are lots of ways to give to the poor. And the definition of poor is not just someone without money. There's spiritually poor. There's those that need to be administered to. Some people need time more than they need actual substance. And so there's ways to give of our
time. Give our time. Give your talents. Yeah, serve other people. Other ways that if you don't have the financial means to help, that you can help. And every little bit, it goes back to, have we talked about this yet?
No, yet. Go ahead.
Okay, in verse 27, it says, and see that all these things are done in wisdom and order. And so I love that, because there will be times when you can do a lot, and there will be times when you can't, or when you are the one that's poor or in need. But it's not something we can concretely state, do this, do that. It's something between you and the Spirit. So, or you and God through the Spirit. You use the Spirit to be able to decide where you are in your life and what you can give. And it says, therefore all things, and thereby he might win the prize. And so as we do this, God knows our hearts. And he knows your intents. He knows what you want to give. And it reminds me of the widow's mite story. You know, that how there are rich men who were giving tons of coins, into the, what was it? Just like the treasury, whatever. And there comes this widow who all she could give was a mite. That was all she was able to do. Yet Christ said she has done so much more than those who gave tons, but their heart was not into it.
Yeah, give their heart.
Yeah, so she gave of her heart. She gave of herself. And so as we're talking about doing this and serving the poor, like Peter said, we just need to use the Spirit and give what we can when we can, and do it with the right frame of mind and heart. Do it with your heart in the right place. And God knows that. And he will see that sacrifice and that offering, and then we shall be able to win the prize.